Peace. So we're going to talk about terrorism for a minute. In this society, in this country specifically, terrorism came with this country from its inception. You understand what I'm saying? Look at the process of slavery. All of this, the founding fathers were slave masters. The whole science of slavery itself was a terrorist act. It was a psychological warfare act, and we can see it. America breeds terrorists, just like America breeds serial killers. This country breeds over 85% of serial killers come from right here from these shores. What is it about this country that breeds this type of mentality? Well, what it is that this type of mentality was inbred in this country from its inception. The people who came, you know what I'm saying? The Europeans who came with a particular type of mentality. Remember, they were criminals and thieves and murderers in their own country when they were put over here. The same with Australia and their founding fathers, criminals and murderers and so on and so forth. So when we think about this, the real terrorism, the real terrorist act is not Islam. It's never been Islam. You understand? Islam is taking is being the scapegoat for somebody else's ideology of what they want to call terrorism. Because see, the Crusades are still ongoing, and the descendants of the Crusaders still exist. And what you're looking at is a continuation of the Crusades, because it is Islam that civilized Europe. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't some pale-faced people who came into Europe and gave it life. It was melanated people. It was African people who raised Europe from the dead, literally, and gave it life. You understand what I'm saying? And for that, they are ungrateful. And they've been ungrateful. You understand what I'm saying? They lived in... That's just how it is. That's what it is. So when I think about that, and when I think about what's happening on these shores with the whole ideology of radical Islam, we as Muslims and Muslims know and understand that that's not us. What they're calling radical Islam has nothing to do with the deen. That has everything to do with indoctrination and everything that is counterculture to what we call Islam. You understand what I'm saying? But that's a whole nother thing, because that's benefiting. That's benefiting this particular government, because it doesn't have to look at the real terrorist threat, which are Caucasian men. And they've always been the terrorist threat. You understand? Like I said, the first terrorist organization that was found in this country was the Ku Klux Klan, which is an organization that still exists to this day, as well as their subsidiaries, Aryans and so on and so forth. They all still exist to this day. But anytime anybody else tried to have a movement that would protect them from terrorism at the hands of their own government and so on and so forth, that they have been excluded from as citizens, Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army, Symbionese Liberation Army, Operation Move, and so on and so forth. Any of these different organizations were destroyed from the inside out, COINTELPRO out, broken down, destroyed, whatever. But the Ku Klux Klan still exists. The Aryan Nation still exists. All of these white supremacist organizations are growing now. They're having a growth spurt. You understand what I'm saying? They are being pushed forward into the mainstream. And what we see also what we see is that many of the white supremacists are now infiltrating and sliding their way into mainstream social institutions, police departments, fire departments, Congress, government, schools. They're everywhere. There's a lesson here for those of us who understand the science of warfare. Maybe you should be practicing the same thing. You want to practice activism? There's a couple of different forms of activism. One of the forms of activism is system infiltration. Infiltrating the system. But you ain't hearing me, but you don't hear me though. I'm giving you some jewels. And I'm going to tell you something. Scholarship can be activism if it is true in its form, because see, scholarship and activism doesn't have, when you're a scholar activist, you're not teaching about history and all of those things. When you're a scholar activist, you are taking the lessons from resistance and you are implementing them lessons and currently updating them lessons, and you are putting it to activism. That's what you're doing. You're not talking about what we used to do in the ancient times and blah, 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 blah. That's not scholarly activism. You understand? So we have to begin to reevaluate the way we do things and the way we look at things, because the biggest terrorist threat is not Islam, but it is European men, white men, quote unquote, so-called white men. They are the radicalized Christians. This is radicalized Christianity. Yeah, I'm putting language on it. Just like you put language on radicalized Islam, this is radicalized Christianity. And it's been radical from its inception. All you gotta do is go back and look at the history of it. From its forming. Remember, Christianity was formed by Rome. The Romans, and the Romans were good for crucifixions and all types of foul atrocities and so on and so forth. So the Crusades are still ongoing in this day and time. You understand what I mean? And the real terrorist threat, again, I'm going to say it again. The real terrorist threat is not Islam. It's never been Islam. The real terrorist threat is Caucasian men. That's the real terrorist threat. And anything that's counterculture to Caucasian men and their terrorist threat is a terror to them. Freedom is a terror to them because they've been in control through their supremacy. And when that's threatened, they will reach out far to create something as a distraction so they can continue to prosper in their superiority psychologically. You know what I'm saying? That's their thing. They believe that they are superior to everybody else. But we know and understand that that's nonsense. So the thing is this: terrorism ain't got nothing to do with Islam. Radical Islam doesn't exist. But radical Christians exist. Who's them dudes who walked in the movie theater and shot all the people in the movie theater? You know what I'm saying? It's the Sandy Hook thing. If you believe it, we know a lot of this stuff was false flags. We know a lot of it was utilized for the purpose of gun reform, to try to control guns. But in the process, there were some people who are sacrificed daily because of what this system is trying to do. You understand? It wants the people to become slaves. It want to take your protection from you so you can be enslaved. But it's okay because it's a new day. You understand what I'm saying? And you got to remember again, the real terrorist threat is right on these shores. Always been on these shores. Timothy McVeigh blew down a federal building. European Mail. You understand? The mail bombing bomber, Ted Kaczynski. I can go on and on about all of these different, you know what I'm saying, terrorists in this country, born and raised right here. And you talking about the borders? Nobody's worried about the border. We're worried about what's inside the walls already. The terrorism is already here. You're using this as a distraction because you don't want to basically deal with your ace in the hole, which is these white supremacist organizations. That's something that on the low keeps some type of control and some type of balance for your twisted psychology. But we got another thing coming for them too, because you know what I'm saying? Everything has its due and everything reap what it sows. There is an effect for every cause and there is a cause for every effect. So with that being said, wake up to what the real terrorist threat is. You understand? Because it has nothing to do with anybody overseas, honestly. It has everything to do with what's happening right here on these shores and who it is on these shores who are the real terrorist threat. With that being said, peace.